Well, I think we can't keep on doing the same things that we've been doing. We've been spending many years now seeking what I'm going to define as a moral mandate, if you like. So we're winning election after election. We have these moral mandates, and then we're going cap in hand to Westminster, and we're begging them and asking them to give us what is really an advisory referendum. But what I'm suggesting is that a referendum really is just another way to use the ballot box. And a referendum is not the gold standard. The ballot box is the gold standard. So I'm suggesting that we give the power back to the people of Scotland and we let them decide when it's time for Scotland to become independent. So it's a permanent mechanism for Scots to express that choice for independence. Well, what I would like to know is if this policy of going cap in hand to Westminster for an advisory referendum hasn't worked so far, why would it work now? Is
this what you were describing as wishy-washy at the hustings?
It is wishy-washy.
From both of them?
It is wishy-washy.
From both of them, though?
Absolutely. I'm the only candidate here that has a credible plan to build support for independence, to unite the movement. Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond were only half right. The ballot box is what we should be aiming for here. The referendum isn't the gold standard, it's actually the ballot box. And any suggestion that the UK government would not respect that democratic mandate expressed by the Scottish people is just nonsense. What we actually need to do is stop thinking that we need to ask any kind of permission from Westminster. If Scotland decides that it wants to be an independent country and it expresses that decision, and I am suggesting we have a permanent mechanism in place for the Scottish people to do that, everyone agrees, all the parties agree, the UK is voluntary. To suggest that the UK government will not recognise that democratic mandate, quite frankly, is ridiculous. On at least 2 occasions during the hustings, and then you repeated it again this evening, you said that you're not as smart as Nicola Sturgeon, and if there was a way to be found, she would have found it. So why do you think that you can succeed where she's failed? So what would you do that she hasn't already done? You're not setting out anything different. So why are you happy to give Westminster a veto on Scottish independence? Are you actually suggesting then that if in 2014 the yes side had won, let's say we got 54% or something, are you really suggesting that at that point the UK government would have said, oh, we're not going to listen to that democratic mandate? Is that what you're suggesting?
You're suggesting a completely different route.
No, I'm not. I'm suggesting the ballot box. It's exactly the same route. Kate, you keep saying that we need to stop being the party of referendums, and in fact we need to become the independence party. But your plan is to keep asking for a referendum. Your route is to ask for another referendum, which is exactly the same policy that the SNP has been pursuing for the last few years. So what makes you think that you'll be able to get a referendum where, you know, we failed on that front before? Why are you pursuing this policy that's failed? How long are you going to wait? Are you going to wait 5 years for independence or 10 years for independence? You want to run the next election, you want to win that election, get another moral mandate, which are going to go and then beg Westminster for another referendum. Is that the plan?
No, I think you're illustrating.
I think the person that their opponents would fear is the person that has a plan to get independence. Trickle-down economics has, of course, been discredited. So what makes you think that your plan for the economy is actually going to help the left-behind communities in Scotland? Is we need to prioritise the people that are working in our oil and gas industry. And we need to remember that the jobs that those people are doing in oil and gas are supporting communities right across Scotland. And I'm suggesting that we prioritise them and we make sure that we don't end these jobs prematurely when those people don't have jobs to move into and as a result hollow out communities across Scotland. And I think we need to be honest with people. There's no point importing oil from other countries that's been produced under lower environmental standards. So what I'm saying is we need to look very carefully at the time frame that we do this under and make sure that we have the jobs to move people into. And I'm totally committed to net zero, but we need to be honest with people. There's a limited amount that we can do under devolution. If we were an independent country, we could accelerate that timetable, we could invest in renewable industries and we would have the jobs to move people into. But at the moment, we are shackled to the UK and we are having to move at the same pace as them. I went to visit Flowwave on Friday, and they're looking at innovation to do with wave and tidal power. And that is exactly what we need to be doing. We need to be investing in this amazing world-leading level of innovation in renewables. And then we need to make sure that we keep the skills, the supply chain and the production in Scotland. We have an opportunity here to create an industry of the future that will create the jobs that we need.
1 in 4 children are in poverty, as I've already said. What's your plan to reduce that? And do you not think it's an outrage?
It absolutely is an outrage. And that's why I cannot stand here and tell the people in the SNP to keep voting for us and voting for us and voting for us with no plan for independence in sight. That's why I want Scotland to become independent, and that's why I want independence to come sooner. I don't want to be leading people up the hill only to have them lead them back down again. We need a credible plan to build support for independence and then to get UK government to listen to Scotland's democratic choice. That is what needs to be done, and I am the person here that is going to do that. I think it would be very good for Scotland to be back in the EU. However, I think we need to be pragmatic. And there is some suggestion that might take many years. It could take maybe as many as 10 or 15 years for Scotland to be back in the EU. So I think looking at this purely from a pragmatic sense, it might make sense for us to look at potentially joining EFTA instead. We need to prioritise the market, the single market, transfer of goods and services, etc. And also, we need to be mindful that under my plan, when we get to the point where we're going to be negotiating with the UK for independence, we need to have as strong a negotiating hand as possible. And I think that that is something that the membership of the SNP might want to have a think about, and we could debate at a conference. Yes, I think it's an absolute disgrace, the way that the UK energy market has been set up and that people's bills are skyrocketing. If we don't do something, we are going to see people losing their homes over this, bills going up from £100 to £400. It's just not sustainable for most people. They don't have that disposable income there to order to deal with that rise. So it's a disgrace that we're in this situation, especially when Scotland is producing a lot of cheap, clean energy, that we're in this situation. So I'm going to look again at the situation with regard to a Scottish energy company. I think we could be generating our own energy, and that will keep the bills down for people, which will mean they'll have more disposable income to spend on other things. My preference would be to have an elected head of state, but listen, SNP policy is, of course, to keep the monarchy, and I think that was the right policy at the time regarding the Queen, who was so well regarded and had been in that position for such a long time. We're in a new circumstance now, and I'm wondering if this is the time now to go back to conference and to have a debate about whether that is the right policy for the SNP or whether we should move to the policy of having an elected head of state. The SNP has lost its way. There's been no progress on independence in the last few years, despite the worst UK governments of all time. We used to grow support for independence by governing wisely, and it worked. We secured the only majority government in Scottish history and a referendum in which we built support to within a whisker of victory. The ballot box is the gold standard of democracy. And since Westminster is preventing Scotland from having its say on independence through a referendum, our only legal option is to use the ballot box we do have access to. At every election going forward, we will make it crystal clear that a majority of votes for the SNP will be a democratic mandate for independence. And my priority as leader will be to deliver effective government that responds to the needs of the people of Scotland. And at the same time, we will build the foundations for independence through a dedicated commission and launch a new independence campaign through a national convention. A vote for me is a vote for a better Scotland for all of us through independence.